There is a quiet kind of courage in revealing the parts of yourself that others spend their lives concealing. The moment you show what most keep hidden, you cross an invisible line, the one separating the acceptable self from the honest one. People say they want truth, but what they really want is comfort dressed as honesty. The raw, unfiltered self unsettles them because it exposes the lies they've built their lives upon. To be real in a world addicted to pretending is to become dangerous. Carl Jung warned that the most frightening confrontation is not with others, but with the self. To meet your shadow, the shame, the envy, the rage, the hunger, is to walk through your own darkness without a torch. But when you dare to do so publicly, when you stop apologizing for being human, the collective turns its gaze toward you like a mirror it cannot bear to face. They call you too much, too raw, too sensitive, because your authenticity threatens their denial. Exposing your shadow is not a confession of weakness, it's an act of sacred rebellion. You refuse to keep feeding the illusion that everyone else maintains. Yet this honesty comes at a price. People withdraw, they misunderstand, they whisper about your change, not realizing you've simply stopped lying. You begin to feel like an outcast among the polite, a foreigner in your own tribe. But in that exile, you discover something rare, peace. The kind that grows when you no longer need to perform for acceptance, because the truth is, there is nothing more magnetic than someone unafraid to be seen, and nothing more unsettling. To show your shadow is to give others permission to meet their own, and most are not ready for that kind of mirror. So if you've ever felt the weight of being real in a world built on masks, this journey is for you. Stay close. We're about to step deeper into the hidden architecture of the self. Don't forget to subscribe, leave your thoughts, and like this video if you've ever paid the price for being honest. Every society wears a mask. It smiles with civility while hiding its hunger. It preaches compassion while quietly rewarding power. It speaks of truth while worshipping image. Beneath all the noble words and polished gestures lies the same ancient instinct, to belong at any cost, even if it means abandoning the self. And so the collective becomes a theater, and each individual an actor reciting lines that keep the illusion alive. The tragedy is not that people lie, it's that they've forgotten they're doing it. We learn to pretend so early that by adulthood, performance feels like identity. We call it personality, culture, professionalism, morality. But underneath those labels lies the same quiet fear. If they see who I really am, I will be rejected. This is the invisible hypocrisy, not malicious, but mechanical. A collective trance where authenticity is dangerous and conformity is rewarded. Carl Jung understood this perfectly. He saw that the persona, the mask we show to the world, is necessary but fatal when mistaken for the self. The more we identify with the mask, the more hollow we become. We seek validation instead of truth, applause instead of peace. And the cost of maintaining that image grows heavier with time. You can feel it in the exhaustion of constant pretending, the strain of being what the world approves rather than what your soul requires. If you look closely, you'll notice that the entire system depends on this masquerade. Social norms, politics, religion, even modern spirituality all rely on maintaining an illusion of moral clarity while suppressing the chaos underneath. But no mask can last forever. The collective shadow begins to leak through, in scandals, in outrage, in quiet despair. What was hidden demands to be seen. To recognize the hypocrisy is not to condemn it, but to wake from it. Awareness is the first act of rebellion. Once you see the mask, you can choose whether to keep wearing it or to breathe at last as who you truly are. To be authentic in a false world is to live in constant friction. Your very presence becomes a quiet disturbance, not because you attack, but because you refuse to participate in the game. When everyone is performing, the one who speaks sincerely sounds like a heretic. The one who stops pretending becomes a threat to the collective illusion. Truth, when spoken without armor, cuts through the fabric of social peace. And yet, nothing is more alive than the soul that dares to be seen. You begin to notice how the world rewards imitation and punishes sincerity. People say they want honesty, but only when it confirms what they already believe. They crave vulnerability, as long as it remains aesthetic, curated, palatable. But real vulnerability, the trembling voice, the unedited truth, exposes too much. It breaks the spell of control. That is why authenticity feels dangerous. It confronts others with the parts of themselves they've buried. You become a mirror they never asked for. The discomfort grows not just from others' reactions, but from your own. To live without pretense means to live without a script. There's no applause, no guarantee, no safety net. Every interaction becomes raw, unpredictable, real. Some will admire your openness, others will resent it. The ones who claim to love truth will turn away when it shines too brightly, and yet, even through the loneliness, there is a strange relief, the freedom of not needing to be liked, to exist. Carl Jung once said that individuation, becoming whole, is not a comfortable process. It burns away the false layers until only what is real remains, and that burning hurts. But comfort was never the goal. Truth was. When you start living from that truth, even pain becomes sacred, because it is proof that you are no longer numb. So yes, being real in a false world will cost you your belonging, but it will give you something infinitely rarer, yourself. There is a moment in every awakening when silence becomes confession, not the loud, dramatic kind that begs for forgiveness, but the quiet acknowledgement whispered to yourself, "Yes, this darkness is also mine." That sentence changes everything. It breaks the illusion of innocence that the ego clings to. It dismantles the idea that only others are flawed, that only others carry the shadow. In that admission, you stop running, and when you stop running, the healing begins. To confess your shadow is to reclaim your power. Every emotion you've rejected, the jealousy, the rage, the arrogance, the shame, has been waiting to be seen, not punished. Jung taught that what we repress doesn't disappear. It rules us from below. When you finally turn toward it with awareness instead of fear, you discover something paradoxical. The darkness is not trying to destroy you. It's trying to make you whole. It holds the parts of your soul that were exiled in order to appear good. This inner confession is not weakness. It is maturity. It is the moment the warrior sets down their sword and looks honestly at the battle within. The one who admits their shadow becomes less controlled by it. And slowly, your perception of others changes. You stop condemning and start understanding. You see the same hidden struggle in every face, the same split between who we are and who we pretend to be. You realize we are all fragments of the same unseen confession. But this awakening is not comfortable. It strips you of moral certainty. It humbles you. It silences the need to judge. In its place grows compassion, raw, real, and terrifyingly tender. If you've ever felt the courage to face the parts of yourself that scare you, you've already begun this silent confession. Tell me in the comments, have you ever met your own shadow and instead of running decided to listen? Shame is one of the most subtle prisons ever built, invisible, internal, and almost sacred in its cruelty. It doesn't scream or strike. It whispers. It tells you that certain parts of you are unworthy of love. It convinces you that if the world ever saw your hidden flaws, you would lose everything. So you hide, not because you want to, but because you believe exposure means annihilation. And slowly you begin to confuse survival with silence. Unlike guilt, which arises from what we've done, shame attaches itself to what we are. It's the invisible stain painted by culture, religion, family, an inheritance passed down through generations. It begins in childhood, in moments too small to notice, a glance of disapproval, a word that says, "You're too much." That tiny seed grows roots in the soul, teaching you to shrink before you've even learned who you are. By adulthood, shame becomes the invisible hand guiding every decision. It dictates what you say, how you love, and who you allow yourself to become. Carl Jung understood shame as the guardian of the shadow. It stands at the gate of authenticity, daring you to pass. Most never do. They spend their lives decorating their cage, trying to appear free while their hearts whisper the truth. I am still hiding. But those who dare to look through shame, instead of away from it, discover that it was never the enemy. It was the signal, the burning pain of disconnection calling you back to wholeness. When you confront shame with awareness, it loses its power. The walls begin to dissolve, and what was once unbearable becomes human. You realize that everyone carries this same secret wound, the belief that they must earn the right to exist. Seeing this, compassion awakens. The prison doors were never locked. They were held closed by fear. Freedom doesn't mean never feeling shame again. It means recognizing it for what it is, the echo of love waiting to be remembered. There is a sacred terror in being fully seen, not by others, but by the quiet, unblinking gaze of your own consciousness. To stand before yourself without disguise is the most intimate form of truth. No filters, no performance, no moral costume to protect you. Just the raw pulse of being, fragile, contradictory, beautifully imperfect. That is what it means to be naked before the self. And it requires more courage than any public act of bravery. Most people never experience this kind of seeing. They live behind mirrors, fogged with distraction and self-image. The thought of truly facing their inner reflection feels unbearable. But once awareness begins its work, there's no turning back. The layers start to peel away. The roles you've played, the achiever, the savior, the good one, begin to crumble. The more honest you become, the more illusions fall. Until one day, you stand there stripped of story, staring into the infinite silence that has always been watching you. Carl Jung described this as the meeting of the ego and the self, the moment the false self finally bows to the deeper truth within. It feels like death, because in a way it is. The identity you've carried begins to dissolve. And yet in that surrender something eternal emerges. You realize that you are not the mask nor the shadow, but the awareness that sees both. You are the light behind the eyes, the witness that cannot be destroyed. To be seen naked by consciousness is to accept your humanity without flinching, to look at your flaws and not hide, to hold your contradictions with tenderness instead of shame. It's the beginning of unconditional love, the kind that has nothing to prove, nothing to protect, the kind that sees everything and still says, yes, I am this too. Most search their whole lives to be seen by others. Few discover the liberation of being seen by themselves. The moment you begin to live without masks, the world shifts around you. People who once felt comfortable in your presence now look at you with unease. They sense something different, not arrogance, not rebellion, but an energy that refuses to conform. Authenticity has a strange gravity. It exposes falseness without speaking a word. Simply by being real, you become a mirror, and most people are not ready to meet their own reflection. At first, you might believe that honesty will inspire others. You think that by showing your truth, you will give them permission to show theirs. But often the opposite happens. Your clarity confronts their denial. Your transparency threatens their facade. They may withdraw, criticize, or label you as too intense, too emotional, too much. What they truly mean is, you make me see what I've been avoiding. And that is the price of revealing yourself. Your light will illuminate their shadows, and not everyone wants to see. Carl Jung called this projection, what we refuse to face within, we cast onto those who embody it. So when you stand unapologetically in your truth, you will attract both admiration and hostility. Some will find in you the courage they lacked, others will try to silence you to preserve their illusion. This is not your fault. It's the law of consciousness. The unveiled presence disturbs the sleeping mind, and yet beneath the rejection lies something profound. You start to realize that this resistance is proof of your authenticity. The discomfort you cause in others is often the echo of their own awakening beginning to stir. In time, some of those same people may return, ready to listen, ready to see. So when the world misunderstands your openness, don't retreat. Stay rooted. Let your truth speak softly through. Your being. The world doesn't need more perfection. It needs more realness, even if it trembles in its presence. Tell me in the comments, Have you ever felt this? The tension between showing your truth and being misunderstood by those around you. There comes a moment in every journey of awakening when the false self begins to collapse, not in a single dramatic explosion, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, like a building whose foundations have started to crumble. You wake up one morning and realize that the person you've been performing no longer fits. The smiles feel rehearsed. The goals feel borrowed. The life you built begins to feel like someone else's dream. And beneath that realization lies a quiet terror. Who am I without the mask? The destruction of the false self is both liberation and loss. You grieve the identity that once kept you safe, the roles that earned approval, the beliefs that made sense of things, the habits that gave you belonging. But as they fall away, you start to see how heavy they were. Every piece of your false identity was built to protect you from truth. And truth, when it finally arrives, asks for everything. Carl Jung described this as a kind of psychic death, the ego surrendering to something larger, the self emerging from the ruins of persona. It's not glamorous, it's disorienting, humbling, and deeply human. You might feel detached from everything that once defined you. You may even mistake this emptiness for failure. But what is truly happening is rebirth. The fire of awareness is burning away everything that isn't real. This destruction is necessary because you cannot carry both illusion and freedom. The false self thrives on control. The true self lives in surrender. When the mask dissolves, what remains is not a new identity but space. Vast, quiet, honest space. In that space, life begins to flow differently. You no longer need to manage perception. You simply are. The ego fears this collapse, but the soul has been waiting for it all along. Every ending is an opening. Every loss of identity is an invitation to remember what was never lost, the consciousness that watches all masks come and go. After the collapse of the false self, there is silence, vast and unsettling. It feels like standing in the ruins of a life that once made sense. But slowly, as the dust settles, something begins to breathe beneath the emptiness. Freedom, not the loud, triumphant kind celebrated by the world, but the quiet, luminous freedom of no longer needing to pretend. For the first time, you feel the air against your unguarded self. You begin to realize that authenticity, though costly, is the purest form of peace. The unmasking reveals that nothing real can ever be taken from you. The love that depended on performance was never love. The validation earned through conformity was never belonging. The prison of perception dissolves, and in its place emerges a simple truth. You were never meant to be perfect, only whole. The self you hid to be accepted was the only part of you that could ever offer real connection. Carl Jung understood that wholeness is not achieved by becoming pure, but by embracing the full spectrum of being. When the mask falls, you discover that the light and the shadow were never enemies. They were partners in the same dance of awareness. To live without pretense is not to become flawless, but to become transparent, letting existence move through you without resistance. And yet this freedom is quiet, almost invisible. It doesn't demand attention, it simply is. You stop chasing meaning and start living it. You no longer seek approval, because the very need for it dissolves in the clarity of presence. Relationships change, not because you reject others, but because you can finally meet them without disguise. The masks that once separated you begin to disappear between souls that dare to see each other. This is the paradox of awakening. What felt like death was only the end of imitation. The real life begins here, raw, imperfect, unguarded, real. In the end, awakening is not about becoming better, it's about becoming real. Wholeness is not perfection, it's the quiet acceptance of every fracture within you. To be whole is to stop editing your existence, to let the shadow and the light coexist in peace. It's the realization that there was never anything wrong with you, only parts of you that were waiting to be seen without judgment. When you stop trying to fix yourself, you finally start to feel yourself, and that is where beauty begins. Being whole means living without armor. You laugh and cry from the same place. You speak gently, not to appear kind, but because cruelty no longer feels natural. You no longer divide your heart into acceptable and forbidden emotions. Everything is part of the same sacred rhythm: joy and sorrow, clarity and confusion, strength and fragility. You begin to understand that your contradictions are not flaws, but notes in a larger harmony. The soul doesn't want to be perfect. It wants to be complete. Carl Jung wrote that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is the essence of beauty, not the denial of darkness, but the courage to hold it with love. When you can look at your shadow and no longer flinch, you have touched the divine. When you can see yourself entirely and still whisper yes, you have become human in the truest sense. Wholeness is not a destination. It's a way of being, an honesty that breathes through every moment. You stop searching for truth because you've become it, and that truth is quiet, unshakable, radiant. If you've reached this far, you're not just watching, you're remembering. You've walked with me through darkness and light, through illusion and revelation. If this journey spoke to something deep inside you, subscribe to join this circle of awareness. Leave a comment sharing what part of yourself you've reclaimed, like this video, to help awaken others, and watch the next episode. We'll go even deeper into the hidden architecture of the soul.